So I heard that you might be in the market for some kind of tutorial. Well, that works out really well for me because it's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday, we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, we're going to dive into Lightroom. We're going to look at 3 tips that will instantly make you a better photo editor, and you'll come out with really nice, really lovely photos. So let's get into it. Let's dive into Lightroom. I've got Lightroom open here. We're going to go through a couple of different photos. We're going to talk about the tips. Let's get straight into it. Tip number 1 is to use the presets that are built into Lightroom, to use the profiles that are built into Lightroom to kind of give you an idea of how you might want to edit your photo, to give you style kind of choices that you might want to go for. Lots of different things like that. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. We've got this photo of this rose here. If you weren't sure exactly how you might want to edit this, how you wanted this to look, you can come over to the left where you'll see that Lightroom has got lots and lots of different presets built in to the program. So they're all handily put into these little folders like black and white, cinematic, cinematic 2, and so on and so on. I'm a big fan of the cinematic ones, and just by mousing over them, you can actually see what the photo would look like. So let's say that we like this one here. We can click it. That's applied the preset to the photo. And then we can come up here. We've got this little slider, which is a reasonably new addition to Lightroom, a few months old, but reasonably new. We can reduce or increase how much the preset is being applied to the photo. That's a huge addition because it means if you think that's too much, you can literally just tone it down. Now, what I really, really like about working with presets like this is that you can apply it to the photo, and then you can come over here to the right where you've got all of your different sliders for contrast and all your stuff, all your editing tools basically. You can adjust it as much or as little as you'd like. So you can really go in and tweak it to your heart's content so it can look exactly the way that you want the photo to look. So let's say you love this, but you want to reduce the color grading. You could just turn that off completely, or you could add to it. You could go to the hue, saturation, and luminance tab. You could reduce the saturation of the reds. You could up the saturation of the reds. You can do pretty much whatever you want. You can come in and adjust the tone curve, really make it your own. So it's a great place to kind of start your editing and then change it up if you'd like to. You've also got the profiles, which is a similar kind of thing. So over here on the right, we can click on this kind of tab here to open the profile browser, where we can choose different kind of looks again. I like the modern looks. So again, you can just mouse over these and it will show you what it's going to look like. If we click number 1 here, again, we've got a slider to reduce or increase the amount this is being applied. So that's a pretty, edited photo of that rose, but I hope it gives you an idea of how powerful these tools can be. So tip number 2 is that masks and masking will really take your photo and your photo editing to the next level. Now, I'm borrowing a little bit from last week's tutorial where we went in depth on this topic. We'd looked at this photo, we actually edited it in full together. And essentially, if you look at this, we've got our global edits here on the right. So things like highlight, shadows, contrast, all that kind of stuff. But if you affect those, it'll affect that on the entire photo. If I raise the shadows up, it'll raise the shadows up everywhere. Whereas with masking, which I can come up to just here, will affect local parts of the photo, individual areas that you assign in various different ways. So for example, I've got 10 masks on this photo. And to give you an idea of how powerful this is, I'll turn off all of the masks. That's what the photo looks like without any masks. If I turn it back on, look at the difference. We have a huge amount going on here. So for example, we've got things like, if I turn this one off, you can see we had a bit of drama going on there in the sky. We can turn it back on and you can see it makes a massive difference. This one here, I've brushed on some darkness to some of the clouds, turn it back on. It makes a big difference. We can darken the foreground here. And you might think some of these are reasonably minimal. And I think that's the idea with this, is that you want to keep it reasonably subtle, but you start adding them all together and it creates a really spicy edit and it looks fantastic. And this really is what will take your photos to the next level. It allows you to do things like dodging and burning, which if you're not familiar with, essentially is creating and shaping the light within your photo. So here, for example, if we turn these masks off, you can see that the landscape is pretty dull in terms of light, right? There's not a lot going on here. It's just all kind of one flat light. So if I turn the mask back on, I've shaped that light a little bit across the landscape. So we've got shadows, we've got highlights, we've got interesting areas. and it changes things massively. Now, I've not done anything super tricksy like you might do in Photoshop where you replace the sky or something like that. This is literally just working with what's already in the photo, but by using these masks, you can create something really beautiful. Now, if you want a more in-depth tutorial specifically about this, last week's video, which I'll link to in the description, really goes in depth on this photo. So you can see exactly how I've done all of these masks, 10 masks in total, and how we got to this point. Ultimately though, it is extremely rare these days that I don't use some kind of masking when I'm editing pretty much any photo. Even that rose photo from a little bit earlier on, I would probably use some mask to shape the light a little bit onto the rose itself. Right, tip number 3 is going to be to create copies of your photos within Lightroom so that you can make different edits. And this is actually something, again, we've done a video on this. I'll link to that in the description as well. But this is a great way of experimenting, of trying out different things, of experimenting with black and white and then color and then desaturated and all kinds of different stuff, and developing a bit of a style for your edits. This is a great way to force yourself to think about how you're editing things. And it'll also get you out of a bit of a slump if you always edit every photo in basically the exact same way. It'll get you out of that kind of slump because it'll force you to think of different ways to edit your photo. And ultimately, if you do this enough, you will start to approach every photo individually. So you'll have a bit of a style, but you will edit every photo differently and individually to the strengths of that photo. And ultimately, we can just create a very different version of the photo. So we could go for completely different kind of color grading, different crop. We could go black and white. There's a lot that we could do here. We go heavy contrast, low contrast, lots of different things. And it really forces you to kind of play around with things. You could check out those presets, you could check out some masking. And really, if I'm being totally honest with you, a combination of all 3 of these tips when you go to edit photos will ultimately make you a better photo editor. It'll give you better photo results in the end, and it will really take everything up another level. So hopefully these 3 tips have been helpful. Hopefully these are things that you feel like you can, apply to your photos, and maybe it's something different, but maybe you already do this kind of stuff. Let me know down in the comments if you have any other interesting tips that you think will really help take your photo editing to another level within Lightroom. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe because there's new content all the time, including new tutorials every Tuesday. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.